take time, take time, take time, take time, take time, take time.
Hi, everybody. Within this whole stretched period, this has been one of the events I've been most looking forward to, and I'm so grateful that tonight is now tonight. I'm Kyle DeCuyan, Executive Director of the Poetry Project, and it is truly so special to be with you this evening. Thank you to everyone who's listening, and thank you especially to Ann Lauterbach for joining us. A few notes before we get into the event. My colleagues from the Poetry Project tonight are James Barrickman and Anna Kryenberg. Anna is going to be dropping a link for Zoom FAQs into the chat. You are welcome to use this chat as a space for talking with one another and expressing appreciation. And while your microphones are switched off for the time being, everyone will have the option at the end to switch them on. You are also welcome to keep your video camera either on or off. Please just note that this event is being recorded. So if your camera is on, your face may be visible at some point in the archived video of the event. In the upper left corner of the Zoom screen, I also want to note that there's a link for live transcription through Otter AI in case anyone may appreciate having access to that feature. Anna is also going to share now our statement of safer space. We're doing our best to keep this a mutually respectful environment, but if you do receive any unwanted private communications in the course of the event, please just chat anyone marked staff and we'll get it taken care of right away. If we were gathering tonight, as we have for 55 years in shared place as well as time, and as we're beginning to slowly and cautiously do now, we would be in the parish hall of St. Mark's Church. We are committed to continuously and critically engaging the history and future of our presence in this particular space. And as part of that, we would like to acknowledge that our venue, as well as the place I'm speaking from tonight, is built upon unceded indigenous land, specifically the territory of the Lenape people. We recognize the continual displacement and violence perpetrated against Indigenous people and people of color by the US, and are aware that these kinds of acknowledgements can be misused as stand-ins for actual decolonization work, which is something for us to bear in mind as we go forward in our ongoing commitment to accountability, reparation, and equity. We invite you to join us in this work from all of the different places where you are, and are sharing another resource in the chat, a map through nativeland.ca, not as an endorsement of this resource's completeness, but as a starting place for those we hope might feel encouraged to consider in new ways the histories of the places where we are. And finally, while we've made all of our online programs free, we've also continued to pay poets and artists for their readings, performances, teaching, and writing. So if you feel moved to offer your support for this work, Anna is placing a link to donate in the chat. And now I'd like to turn to introducing Ann Lauterbach. Across her poetry, essays, her reflections on art, Ann Lauterbach's deep feeling for time seems to me as near as we can get in language to time as sensory experience. The temporal in image, the visual in sound, the sonic hovering with something like touch. The textures of her work sing with dailiness, the hums and astonishments of constancy and change, and frequently with some syntactical curiosity of how an order becomes such. A chronology, a story, a premise of consequence and association. The structures in her work register in my reading as choreographic, the way a dancer's gestures sculpt and undo their atmosphere. Her study is restless and attentive. Where and how is authority conferred in a field of so much accumulating information and disinformation? What will be our enduring or new means toward knowledge? Whatever they are, they must be relational. And whether she's pulling from memory, reading, annotation, listening, viewership, one senses in Ann Lauterbach's work of regard for the plural, what we have imprinted and inherited with our many hands and voices. Her lecture this evening is concerned at least in part with history, and fittingly its title is That Various Field. Ann Lauterbach has published 10 collections of poetry, most recently Spell, several chapbooks, and numerous essays on poetics and art. She was born and grew up in Manhattan. She teaches at Bard College, where she was for 28 years co-chair of writing in the MFA. And it's my great pleasure now to welcome Ann Lauterbach to the Poetry Project.
Right here. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We hear you well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kyle, and hello, everybody. And thanks for being virtually present. I wish I could see your faces, but maybe at another time I'll be able to see your faces. I'm not sure how this happened. It was in the before times when things in general were fraught, but normal-ish. And Kyle wrote to ask if I would like to give a talk on history. He didn't say what history or whose or why it had occurred to him that I might have something to say about history. I said, yes. The date was a long way away, another season away, a pandemic away. The talk got postponed. That seemed about right, since my entire sense of history is based on belatedness, things that happen after the fact. A friend commented that he thought day was the measure of my life and work, and I can see this. I don't like to plan ahead, but I love to awaken to the prospect of a day with its clutter of possibilities in my mind. My days lists are not in chronological order, so it is not without perverse irony that I agreed to give a lecture on history. Anyway, I called the talk That Various Field after the poem Salute by James Schuyler. Past is past, and if one remembers what one meant to do and never did, is not to have thought to do enough. Like that gathering of one each I planned to gather one of each kind of clover, daisy, paintbrush that grew in that field the cabin stood in and studied them one afternoon before they wilted. Past is past. I salute that various field. That various field, 21 starts for the 21st century and an epilogue. 1, we're tired of trees. We should stop believing in trees, roots, and radicals. They've made us suffer too much. When did I first read these sentences? 1987? I was stupefied. How could they or we be tired of trees? Thought is not arborescent, they added. Maybe this is what got me thinking again about verticals and horizontals, and about the power of the cross as a symbol of an upright person and a continuous horizon, figure, and ground. And so human time as vertical, going down and coming up, the past down and the future up, a kind of ladder or numerical gauge, accounting. I'm working on a schedule made entirely of meanwhiles. 2, as the world shrinks into singularity, however disunited, we are faced with a living multiplicity of narratives. Any history is construction, no matter how many facts are engaged. The resulting epistemological crisis is real. No wonder humans have turned ourselves into mirroring creatures, preening and obsessed with our own proof of being, our own stories and stuff, aided and abetted by the technological angel with his algorithmic weapon. Meanwhile, as I write this sentence, billions of events are transpiring simultaneously, some of which may be found and caught like fireflies in the jar of history's various field. 3. Emerson, History, 1841. Time dissipates to shining ether, the solid angularity of facts. No anchor, no cable, no fences avail to keep a fact a fact. 4. Are we there yet? The child asks, not quite knowing the way time and space conjoin in the distance between here and there. I have an attraction-repulsion relation to abstract nouns. This is probably related to my reading, which is discontinuous both in genre and subject, agitated by a restless sensibility. But somewhere along the timeline, I discovered a certain pleasure in reading texts I didn't quite understand. Poetry, theory, philosophy. I was excited by a failure to fully comprehend. I was interested in forms of apprehension that did not resolve into sense. The main feeling of my childhood was fear, an emotion of anticipation. 5. Lisa Robertson, Untitled Essay, 2012. The poem is the shapely urgency that emerges in language whenever the subject's desiring vernacular innovates its receivers. The poem is the speech of citizenship. The poem distributes itself according to the necessity of subjects to begin speaking to anybody simply because of the perception of continuous co-embodiment as the condition of language. This shaped speaking carries the breath of multiple temporalities into the present, not to protect nor to sanctify the edifice of tradition, but to vulnerably figure historicity as an embodied stance and address the poem's most important gift to politics. Lisa Robertson, The Baudelaire Fractal, 2020. These things happened, but not as described. 6. History, a record or deposit of what happened and its subsequent retrieval, in which causes and consequences are listed or elaborated and overarching ideas or trends discerned. History, an unstable and often contested consensus. History, not biography, not memory, attached not to individuals, but to the ways individuals may have contributed to the ideas of what counts. Those ideas often curtailed into reductive slogans and brands. The New York School, for example. History, the invention of temporal periodicity based on facts and events so that knowledge can be contracted into a quasi-linear regime that allows for expertise, and that expertise often deployed as a form of power. History, the magnet that distorts life, individual lives into categories of significance and insignificance, fueling the engines of originality, success, celebrity on which capitalism depends. Persons make history, we say, as if it were a kind of magical, malleable substance. Revolution and subversion and resistance are the desire to change the nature of what is considered history, what and who is included. The avant-garde, those who get out in front of history as if it were a wave or an army. History, a genre of critical interpretation and evaluation so that it can be said, this is significant, this is not. The desire to be so valued and the desire to be the person who has the authority to make the evaluation, generations, movements, errors, history, a frequently contested arena of human thought, at all times vulnerable to revision. Let us see again. As if all human knowledge of the past were built on a sand dune. history, a plural of plurals hiding in a singular. 7, who started the apparently infinite conversation of temporal accounting known as history? The Greeks, Herodotus, or so we are told by the historians of Western history. When was it noticed that this particular noun, like the huge container barge ever given, stuck in the maw of a too narrow canal, crammed with stuff, this noun, history, would simply not be sufficient going forward, could not be invoked without acknowledging the circumstances of the speaker, her age, her ethnicity, her beliefs, her entrenched ignorance of all things beyond her ever givens. Have you noticed how many correctives, revisions are circulating in the quiet air like living ghosts? Ghosts come back to life, back to our windows, doors, our memories, and our forgettings. Lewis Hyde, a primer for forgetting, getting past the past, 2019. As for repentance, forgiveness, and all the rest, a full public accounting prepares the ground for these, whereupon they either happen or they don't. The grant of amnesty carries no guarantee. Amnesty is therefore a cold forgetting, expedient and instrumental, structural and abstract. It exists to serve the state. Joan Didion, The White Album, 1979. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. 8. We seem to think, to believe that generations have certain shared traits that can be summed up: lost, X, millennial. This is convenient. It functions as a brand. We are branded, and so we are expected to be consistent in our behaviors, our tastes, our point of view. We can be corralled into a pen of shared desires and rendered into images. So then, I am a child of the 60s. This phrase works well since the children of the 60s, that is, those who became adults in the 60s, are often portrayed as childlike. Indeed, flower children is another trademark epithet, there to conjure up bell bottoms, flowing hair, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Forget the notion that some of the children of the 60s rejected a host of realities into which we came. Forget that all that promiscuous freedom was in the name of desiring emancipation from oppressive constructs around gender, race, and what I call the bourgeois paradise, into which it was expected we wanted to arrive, chosen and happy in our views, our politics of righteous condescension, our good taste and belief in our own bestness, our achieved position at the top of our insular worlds. I decided I did not want to think of my life as a ladder, but as a horizontal field in which weedy words might grow. 9. The question of history is tantamount to the question of hope. How might it be possible to read the past in such a way that it allows for hope, and hoping to act toward a future that is not encumbered by bleak pessimism? I have no means to provide the least, the barest answer. But in reading and listening and watching for history to appear as futurity over the past year or so, I have felt baffled by what comes toward like a great flock of Cassandras, full of reproach and recrimination, unforgiving, mean-spirited, and intemperate, and in the name of history, predicting the worst outcome. A year of dread, stupefying, bewildering, in which temporal measures, the calendar and the clock, seem to have been recalibrated, space flattened and annealed to screens, our faces rendered onto a cold geometry of squares, conversation truncated into sequences of non sequiturs, spontaneity in ruins, an acute parataxis, forbidding flow. One thinks of Pandora's box, out of which all manner of evil and pestilence spilled. Only hope remains within. Nietzsche, 1874, on use and abuse of history. Draw around yourself the fence of a large and extensive hope and optimistic striving. Create in yourselves a picture to which the future is to correspond, and forget the myth that you are epigones. You have enough to plan and to event when you imagine that future life for yourselves. But in considering history, do not ask that she show you the how and the with what. Edmund Jabez, From the Desert to the Book, 1980. Every question is tied to becoming. Yesterday interrogates tomorrow, just as tomorrow interrogates yesterday in the name of an always open future. 10. Hope you're all doing okay. Maybe you're eating dinner. 10. Read Anton Gosh, The Great Derangement, Climate Change and the Unthinkable. Read Svetlana Alexeyevich's Secondhand Time, The Last of the Soviets. Read Chris Jennings' Paradise Now, The Story of American Utopianism. Read Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Future by Merlin Sheldrake. Read Simone White's Dear Angel of Death. Read Daniel Mendelssohn's Three Rings, A Tale of Exile, Narrative, and Fate. One of Hannah Arendt's key ideas was plurality, which, as I understood her, meant various as well as multiple. We would call it diversity or inclusivity now, but I think the various plural eludes such a politics. It wants to suggest that within all identifiable groups, there is variety. Are all roses the same? Well, Gertrude Stein evidently thought so, but she was after another idea having to do with eros and similarity. If you say a rose is rapidly thrice, you will find eros waiting to connect like to like, a bouquet of aroused roses. My early schooling was motivated by an ideology that I have come to call radical idealism, a pedagogy arising from the thinking of John Dewey and the left politics of many of the school's founders, including my parents. I'm claiming the word radical because liberal orthodoxy had not yet taken hold. I came out of my 8 years at the school with strong beliefs, perhaps chief among them, that making art, all art, is necessary to democracy. It was art that both animated and alleviated difference, art that allowed strangers to be drawn not to each other, but to a third thing, a dance, a song, a picture, a poem, and in so being drawn, to not find each other threatening in their individual differences, but united in curiosity toward the alluring, maybe perplexing made thing. This is my idealistic conviction still, that art has a purpose after all. Dewey was also a founding influence on Black Mountain College, the great setting for creative thinking, uncoerced by academic hierarchical ideas of judgment, success, or excellence. The relation between experience and experiment was instilled there as it had been instilled in me at Downtown Community School, long before I knew that America had been referred to as an experiment, long before I read Emerson. We sang songs, so many songs drawn from folk and spiritual and working traditions. Our music teacher was Pete Seeger. This land is your land, this land is my land, we sang, filled with guileless affirmation. 11, Hannah Arendt, The Concept of History, 1961. This individual life is distinguished from all other things by the rectilinear course of its moment, which, so to speak, cuts through the circular movements of biological life. This is mortality, to move along a rectilinear line in a universe where everything, if it moves at all, moves in a cyclical order. Whenever men pursue their purposes, tilling the effortless earth, forcing the free-flowing wind into their sails, crossing the ever-rolling waves, that cut across a movement which is purposeless and turning within itself. 12. In my mind, there is sometimes an image, or perhaps only a gesture toward an image of turning, a figure turning. The figure is turning simultaneously toward and away, as if in one of those doors that spin inward and outward, as if on an unanchored carousel. The figure is nameless and without known gender. It isn't me. It is, I suppose, the mere fact of the human spinning in space-time. This figure sometimes appears when I am reading, sometimes when I'm just idly musing on nothing in particular, and it comes to stand in the place of the non-thought, unsought for, unannounced, just there, just here. It comes more particularly when I attempt to think history, and then it is more vivid, the sense of spin more acute and frightening, as if it were asking two questions at once: where to look, how to look. The answer is a blur, a swarm, out of which any named particular, any what, will be felt as a kind of cessation and arrest. The word history itself becomes a murmuring reprise, like an insect's arcing rattle in midsummer, a cicada stuttering the air. I think then about attempting to steady this mutating revolution, but I have no idea how to even begin, how to establish a vivid detail with which to tell myself or you something about this pulsing, shadowy figure. Walter Benjamin comes to mind, turns into the mind. Should I summon him back to see if he can be a guide? Perhaps my turning figure is only a version of his angel, of his heliotropic flower. 13, Walter Benjamin, Thesis on the Philosophy of History, 1940, number 4. The class struggle, which is always present to a historian influenced by Marx, is a flight from the crude and material things without which no refined and spiritual things could exist. Nevertheless, it is not in the form of the spoils which fall to the victor that the latter make their presence felt in the class struggle. They manifest themselves in this struggle as courage, humor, cunning, and fortitude. They have retroactive force and will constantly call in question every victory, past and present, of the rulers. As flowers turn toward the sun by dint of a secret heliotropism, the past strives to turn toward that sun, which is rising in the sky of history. 14. Under the surface or just around the corner, there is violence, an earthquake, planes flying into buildings, drones hitting pedestrians, mobs storming the Capitol, a gun, a bomb, any number of less spectacular, ordinary examples, cuts, bruises, accidents. This violence makes a kind of silent noise that accompanies the harmonies and melodies of polite recitation, the decorum, and even at times the eloquence of discourse. Violence by its nature is inarticulate. It forswears the linguistic solution, essay, prayer, poem, lecture, editorial, legal document, novel. So as long as I am attempting to write reasonably coherent sentences, I am also resisting the violence that undergirds my efforts, as if they, my sentences, are a kind of mask, a tourniquet. Violence seems now very near the surface as we hear about the young airline passenger who had to be strapped down to his seat with duct tape. Each singular instance seems to gather toward a mass: anger, fear, panic, helplessness, incomprehension, loss, grief. These emotions come to each of us over our life, but now they seem to coalesce, and the necessary complement of traits Benjamin lists, courage, humor, cunning, and fortitude, are in their shadow. Jeffrey Sachs, Tikhon, 18 August 2021. In the aftermath of the fall of Kabul, The US mass media is predictably blaming the US failure on an the US mass media is predictably blaming the US failure on Afghanistan's incorrigible corruption. The lack of American self-awareness is startling. It's no surprise that after trillions of dollars spent on wars in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and beyond, the US has nothing to show for its efforts but blood in the sand. 15. Poet Layli Long Soldier in an email to me, 13 of August, 2021. I have realized in my own journey that our community people have particular philosophies, art practices, knowledges, and history that needs to be strengthened and expanded rather than discussed ad infinitum at an elementary level within Western institutions. Our young people also need to feel understood, safe, affirmed in who they are as Native people. And too often they end up feeling lost, tokenized, or misunderstood in mainstream forums. So much time is spent taking care of each other mentally and emotionally, when in fact it would be nice to put that energy into building our scholarship and art practices. I have given this much thought. How do American colleges meet the needs of everyone when America is so diverse? I think of the word approach, as in the way in which we approach something. It doesn't mean that the task has to be realized, its outcome is guaranteed, or that the goal is perfectly achieved. But to approach is to come close. And depending on our approach, it's how we might come closest. 16. How can we escape the literalism of our age, our capacity to think, judge, and act reduced to instrumental strategies generated to force compliance? Emily Dickinson, 1862. I saw no way, the heavens were stitched. I felt the columns close. The earth reversed her hemispheres. I touched the universe. And back it slid, and I alone, a speck upon a ball, went out upon circumference beyond the dip of bell. I've often thought that Dickinson's dashes were meant to indicate spatial turns. The idea of going out upon circumference as if she were able to ride a cartwheel into the heavens is one of so many images in which scale is a source of wonder. Percepts and concepts so closely aligned that they merge in a metaphysical triumph where words cease to name the thing itself, answering the what is, and propose instead increments of apprehension, the nominal what is leaping into a meaning-making economy of unexpected relation. 17, Mina Loy, Aphorisms on Futurism, 1914. The future is limitless, the past a trail of insidious reactions. Life is only limited by our prejudices. Destroy them and you cease to be at the mercy of yourself. Looking on the past, you arrive at yes. Sorry, just skipped back. That was Mina's ghost, I think. Looking at the past, you arrive at yes, but believe you can act upon it. But believe you can act upon it, you already arrived at no. 18. We're getting old, Alice Nolly announced to me when Anselm opened the door to her. History has to be a history of something, someone, somewhere. It is not a ubiquity. The reckoning we are undergoing now is certainly about the fact of distortion in our telling what happened here and there and everywhere. One is stymied in the face of one's ignorance. I am ashamed that I have participated in evading, disallowing, neglecting, wanting always to imagine that art and art making could overcome the sins and arrows of outrageous human acts. Oh, for a happy chance operation, so that fortune and fate could be seen as mere symptoms of a generous and generative gesture, a throw of the dice. The future, a year from Monday. Recently, I saw a picture of the French film director Claire Denis, her hair dyed a straw color, and thought I might dye mine to see if persons would stop addressing me as dear in stores and on trains. May I help you, dear? I think I can recall my mother hating to be called dear, saying, I am not your dear. And some years ago, come to think of it, my undergraduate students started addressing me via email as dearest, dearest Ann. So much for the conversion of endearments into assumptions of extreme intimacy. So much for the difficulty of performing actual acts of care from the cold screens of our lives. I never thought about becoming old. I only thought about dying, or rather, more simply, death. For many years, I tried to get as close as possible to death in my mind in order to reduce the fear of not being. I remember Joe Brainard saying as he was approaching being dead, I'm going to miss being me. I'm less sure of missing being me than I am of missing being here, moving through the days. 19. Okay, a few key words: gather, relation, entangled, play, plural, various, turn. I'm not sure I have any arguments or evidence, only an intuitive awareness that if we are to imagine history as futurity, these terms might come in useful. The sense that life on Earth, Earth's life, is in jeopardy is shared among many. Your life, my life, bare life, I can't breathe. I say this phrase and it brings me sorrow. Just below the sorrow is rage. I can't breathe. I can't aspire, inspire. I can only expire into history. I wish for the future is that we might begin to think outside of the polarities and dualities that have set our world and words into perpetual opposition, either or, win, lose, black, white, us, them, a stupendous antagonism, as Emerson called the human, even as the opposition of human and nature is perhaps the first most ignominious and most destructive antithesis. The up-down verticality with its hierarchy of power and its addiction to accumulation had best bend, turn into a circle, a cycle. Well, let us greet the singular plural they with open arms. Let's all be a they. Fred Moten, subtitle on all three of the books of his trilogy, Consent Not to Be a Single Being. 20. Does it begin with Odysseus's scar? That would be one way to think about the figure of history and poetry as a scar. At one point, it was an active wound. Blood came out of the body, and then later the wound mended, but it left a scar. Poetry is opening the wound of history and the resulting scar, but simultaneously the two events, wound and scar, enjambed. 21. 3 November 2020, 8:20 p.m. I just ate a baked potato and some spinach, earlier leftover roast chicken bit by bit. I went into town and bought a bottle of Maker's Mark, thinking I wanted something stronger than wine for the evening. I made myself a strange cocktail and then watched The Italian Job, the later version, only because my plumber, Dave Black, mentioned it today when I told him I was considering getting a Mini Cooper. He asked me if I had seen the film and I lied, yes, and so thought perhaps I should belatedly correct the lie. As it happens, today is about correcting the lie or lies on a far more consequential level. It isn't clear just now that this will happen. It isn't clear just now that enough persons know or care that they have been living under the auspices of an embodied lie. The singular isn't right, of course, but one of the reasons I'm attracted to abstraction is it can absorb the singular into an inclusive plural that does not ask for the specific instance, allowing all the instances to be gathered into a singular lie or history. History will turn its inevitable page. We will enter our past. For some years, I have been thinking about the difference between the true and the real, and how an empirical veracity, the observed world, has twisted itself around a moral or ethical imperative. Opposing the true is the lie, opposing the real is the fictive, the invented. We need to separate the true from the real and then connect them. This is the work of the imagination. Epilogue. Toward the end of last winter, just after a heavy snowstorm, I took Amtrak into New York to see my dentist. His office is on Madison Avenue and 54th Street. The appointment ended early, and so I decided I would walk down to Penn Station. This was not long after the opening of Moynihan Hall, the vast echoing structure that houses Amtrak, alleviating some of the traffic in Penn Station. Anyway, the streets were still messy with slush, and one stepped off the curbs into deep puddles of brackish water. And as I made my way south and west, block by block, I began to feel more isolated, more anonymous, seeing myself as a small, nondescript, old white woman struggling along with her slight limp, unable to keep pace with the stride for which New York pedestrians are known. And as I went, I saw that fewer and fewer persons were wearing masks, and that most of those with whom I walked were persons of color. By the time I was at Times Square, I was weary. When at last I saw the outlines of Penn Station, I was relieved, but by then I was being accosted frequently by persons asking for money, their arms outstretched. Some had carts with them, heaped with their belongings in black plastic bags. As I was about to cross 34th Street, a youngish, skinny white man lunged toward me, both hands outstretched. I think I said no, quite vehemently, and he in answer screamed back at me, "Why, why, why?" His cry stayed with me, as insistent and belligerent as a crow's. Why, uncomprehending, pleading. On the train back upstate, I thought about the frequent images of personal poverty that had accompanied my walk, and then about St. Francis, and then about poetry. And so also the enduring, linked, idealized, constellated romance I seem to have carried along across the years of my life. Poetry aligned in my inner mind with a certain willed deprivation and exceptionalism, a privileged cultural conceit, almost boastful because chosen, a choice to spend a life as free as possible from certain assumptions about the pursuit of happiness. I would try to keep separate the realms of wants from the realms of needs. Mick Jagger wailing in my inner ear, Bob Dylan's acute social privacy in my inner eye. Why? A lament of such intensity, even now I am close to weeping with a sense of total inability to answer and to in any way align my embrace of a poetics of resistance with the reality of wretchedness and distress I witnessed on my walk. And I remember the walk I took to school along 3rd Avenue, passing the many so-called bums. The figure of history has occurred in many of my poems. Perhaps that is why Kyle asked me to make a talk about history. Here is an early instance. Second Descent, 1975. But the temperature dipped unexpectedly. These inner states can be dangerous even with soft focus, so they flare after spending hours and hours in bed or tucked under a log in the wet woodlands. The toadstools are smooth and taut and sudden, although motionless, unlike the gong or the owl. What about these bricks? What about history? Why is it far off when it should be close, as if someone had clipped the foreground and our ears ring with a high-pitched note? Perhaps because the war has ended and emergencies sprout in strange places, under the bed, in brown paper bags, at home. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anne. It was so so special to spend time with your reading and this talk, which is so much about plurality. And I just truly appreciate this place of irresolution that you brought us. So thank you. Before we let everyone switch on their microphones, I want to let you know what we have coming up next at the Poetry Project. Next Wednesday, we have a reading with Rosemary Waldrop and Wendy Zhu. And then on Thursday, one of our discourse events with Danilo Machado, Can You Read Me Now? And the following day, Friday, with two of our curatorial fellows, Jime Izquierdo Ugas and Edua Restrepo, and that event is Translating Feeling. I'm seeing lots of appreciations for Anne's incredible, breathtaking talk in the chat. And so now I want to invite folks to switch on your microphones if you'd like. And if you want to share your admiration and appreciation, you're very much encouraged to do so.
Hi, Anne. I just want to say you've allowed me to feel human. And you were things you were expressing were things I've been feeling but can't point to exactly. And it was a deluge, a deluge of maybe existential, I don't know. It was very touching, and I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm reading these very sweet things.
I wonder if I could speak, Anne. Hi.
I
I loved hearing your reading list, and I didn't take notes, but I'd love to. I'd love to know if anyone has those titles down, so I could go back and check for those books. I don't have enough books.
none of us have enough books.
Is there a transcript of your talk or an outline that we might be able to go back to and maybe dig into in, past the talk, and maybe educate ourselves a little further? That's all maybes.
I think Kyle has the answer to that, right?
Well, we'll have the recording of this event, but Anne, I hope that some of the effusive appreciation from the chat might persuade sharing of the text. It really is. It's a truly special talk. Even the bibliography of the talk would be incredible. But it's really your it's your reading and your correspondences and just the rivers and connections you're making across these different writers that make something, I don't know, it's just truly remarkable.
Thank you.
Just to add, oh, I'm sorry, Anne, go ahead.
No.
Oh, just to add my voice to the chorus desiring further engagement with this text. I think what's so exciting and also hard listening to you in a pleasurable way, of course, hard, was how many things I felt like you were saying from your generation to mine, and the way that you were saying them very much was honest in terms of, yeah, your archive and your experience. Learning about the fact that you studied at the lab school like lit up all kinds of things in my little network in terms of your work and also the thinking in this piece. So I would love to engage with it more on the page, but I will gladly listen to it again if that's my only option. Thank you.
So Kyle, is this about my just giving the project the text? Is that what is being asked for?
Yes, yeah, and so that can be in this form or
And then what would you do? Just put it up on your site? I just don't
well,
quite.
we could put it up on the site, but I would also love to make like a special object out of it. I think it would be really, it could be beautiful as a like in a chapbook or pamphlet format.
I love chapbooks. I've got hundreds of them, not by me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely desire to share it, but I also feel like it would be a beautiful reading object.
Well, I'm for that. I like tactility, as you know.
And we'll have to keep the archive of this chat as well, because there are so many beautiful appreciations within it.
That's what you send them to me so that I can cheer myself up from time
Yeah,
to time.
In a way, I feel like I witnessed history or a historical moment in this event. And it's so true. I mean, there were so many strands of what you were saying about getting older or the experience of racialized poverty, the city, that are that will be so important to folks my age and what everyone around me has been thinking through and writing about. So it's really powerful, and I'm grateful, especially your reverence for, you mentioned Joe Brainerd, and that tradition, like we need that to strengthen us, because resistance is becoming more and more commodified and contested, and the truer we can be with the essence of so much of what you offered, the better. So I'm just like really grateful. And I also want to say, today's October 7th, the day that Howl was first read at the Sixth Gallery. So that feels significant too, just to mention. Also Amiri Baraka's birthday. So thank you, Anne.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure, Karen, if you're asking to speak, but you're certainly welcome to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm so blown away. I think I'm reading the chat and I'm I'm just almost speechless because I just feel so, this piece is so honoring of this moment that we're living in. And I think in my writing, I'm trying to touch that and share that and create some kind of energy field for all of us. And I feel like you really did that with this work. And I'm so grateful to you and so aided by the work that you've done, the depth that you've gone to feel these things and to depict them and to hold yourself in a centered enough place to be able to have this access and to have this compassion, this breadth of compassion for everything. It's just, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be in this community, even virtually.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because of the delay between the ask and the event, I spent an astonishing amount of time actually as I was reading and thinking, clipping little moments in which the word history came up. I have actually almost, I think, hundreds of pages of these notes, most of which didn't get into the talk at all. But I think they're under the talk in a way. This kind of this almost frightening way in which the media, in particular, is using the word history as a kind of cudgel, which is not in any way examined and opened up and looked inside. And I think it's contributed so much to our sense of fear, because it's being used as this, I don't know, yeah, as a kind of weapon. So we have to de-weaponize history in a way, which is part of what I was trying to do to say, you know, you can believe in the future. I think it's probably very simple. I mean, that wonderful quote from, of all people, Nietzsche, you know, this sort of wonderful sense that going forward is the way. But then we have to begin to amass some kind of positive. I know it's very Pollyanna. I'm not really a Pollyanna. Obviously, this talk is hardly uplifting and on that level, but I do feel that we have to stop living in this kind of reprise of a kind of guilty, oppressive. I mean, Layli's beautiful letter to me, and I didn't write to her and ask her if I could use it, so I hope she's not pissed. But you know, this idea of the approach, you know, this wonderful idea of the approach, and that the approach can get you closer. That seems to me to be really useful. Anything that's more delicate, anything that isn't oriented entirely toward some kind of definition, you know, something that resists the definition. That is part of really what I was trying to do, is to say you have to pull yourselves back from these definitions. They're not helping. We have to stay somewhere outside of this, because the definition is a kind of category. And once you're in a category, you can be used and abused very easily. So you have to say, I don't want to be in any of these categories. I refuse to be in this category.
I love the honesty too about how for you shared how for yourself this land of poetry with it as this like exalting force that would like make it all null and void. I was like, oh, that was so powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Even though on the paradox, like it can too, you know, like I felt that in there in your piece as well, just because what you were doing was nullifying and voiding the stuff that shouldn't be in our way. So thank you for on both counts.
Unless someone else wants to take the microphone, I might propose that we put a semicolon in our conversation, and that Anne will keep in touch with you about how we might share this further, because I think certainly so many people who are listening in tonight would love to return to this text, and I feel pretty sure that there are many other appreciative readers who would love to spend time with it too.
Thanks so much. And thanks for this invitation. It meant an enormous amount to me.
It's truly special to hear, truly. And I also thank you to everyone listening. I loved hearing the kind of intergenerational responses to this talk. I thought that was really beautiful and really special. And I look forward to being with all of you in Zoom time or St. Mark's Place sometime soon.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.